we're not going anywhere. I am not going anywhere. I wouldn't be running if I didn't absolutely believe that I am the best candidate to beat Donald Trump in 2024. We had a Democratic nominating process where the voters spoke clearly. I won 14 million of those votes.
All right, so there you have it, folks. President Biden is making it clear that he will remain in the presidential race despite concerns from Democrats. Now, Biden called into MSNBC's morning show after he sent a letter to Democrats on Capitol Hill that he would not drop out of the race.
I haven't lost. I beat him last time. I'll beat him this time. And this is a guy who, look, we talk about debates. Look at his performance at debates. He lied over, Trump has 50 lies. Look, this is a guy who says 10% of the universe. I want to get into it. He's just a liar. And he hasn't done a damn thing since the debate. He's been riding around in a golf cart for 10 days. He's down in Mar-a-Lago talking with his wealthy friends. I'm not running because of these guys, Joe. I'm running because, and you know me well enough to know this from the very beginning, I ran because I never bought on in the trickle-down economic theory. I never bought into the notion that we have to walk away from the rest of the world and cave to Putin or anybody else. I've never believed any of that. And I'm confident that's where the American people are. So what I did was I went out and I wanted to make sure that there wasn't any slippage at all. And with the average voter, I don't care what the millionaires think. And by the way, 97% of all the people who contribute to us are people making under 200, contribute under $200. I think we have the largest contingent ever in history. I'm not positive of that, but I think that's true. And so I want their support, but that's not the reason I'm running. I'm not running about what they think and what they care about. And by the way, you don't see a whole hell of a lot of them flocking to Trump. You don't see a whole lot of CEOs flocking to Trump. You don't see you see the major economists out there talking about what I have been able to do. I don't hear anybody talking about his economic plan likely to bring America around and keep America first. And by the way, here's Trump talking about all that he's done and Trump and his debate night. He's a pathological liar. He lied about Roe. He refused to accept the outcome of the election. He refused to condemn January 6th. And he says, they claim, he spoke with Putin before he invaded. What the hell are we doing, Joe?
All right. So Tamia D. Booker, founder and managing director of T. Booker Strategies, joins me now to dissect all of this. Tamia, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me today.
Absolutely. My first question to you is this. What do you think about the call to Morning Joe? Do you think that it made a little bit worse in that, listen, we couldn't see him, so we didn't know whether he was reading notes or not. It sounded like he was. There was one time where I caught him making reference to a list that he had. What do you think about his performance and what it did for his chances?
I think that the president, we witnessed amount of frustration in his voice and with this whole issue since the debate. Yes, he had a debate that was not that great. However, he is right. The level of accountability that Trump has had to keep since the debate is not there. He stood there and he told blatant lies. And we have a president who we knew his age when we elected him back in 2020 and knew there would be a chance that he would run again in 2024. And he's someone that has stood with the Black community. He has really helped us. He's been fighting for student loan repayment and forgiveness. And for whatever reason right now, the media is really focused in on a bad debate and less about what is really at stake. Our reproductive rights are at stake. Our health and well-being is at stake. Our safety as Black people in this country are at stake. And so you can't blame him for being frustrated, given that this has been the conversation for the last almost 2 weeks versus a candidate who is a felon and also stood there and told numerous lies throughout the debate.
So to me, I think one of the questions becomes for many, this isn't something that's new for the president. This is something that we've been seeing progressively, whatever you might think it is, in terms of the loss of words, in terms of the blurred speech, in terms of him just not remembering and getting facts wrong. So is there a little bit of concern for some, Biden reelection anxiety?
Yes. And, we saw today, especially during the White House press briefing, they asked the press secretary about his health. And I think we have to lean on really the assessment of the doctors. If the doctors are clearing him and saying that he is good to run the country, then we need to trust in that. It is hard to see when you're seeing someone who also might be just aging. And the country has really expressed concern about this. But I think if he has physicians that have cleared him, then we should continue to trust that he is doing just fine. He's been campaigning since nonstop, traveling all over the U.S., campaigning in battleground states, making his case. And he made a strong case this morning. And I think we have to just lean into the fact that he's made his case. And that's where we are. He's not getting out of the race, and we need to rally behind him.
What about leaning into this whole idea that in order to really kind of solidify or not solidify this, and this is why it's such a between rock and a hard place, do you make sure that you push Kamala out there, the Vice President Kamala Harris out there, or are you holding back on that? Because either way could hurt you. What are your thoughts on that in terms of strategy?
The vice presidential pick is always picked to help lift the ticket, right, and to bring momentum. And she did that in 2020. And so why wouldn't she do that again in 2024? She is someone that can really speak, especially with reproductive rights and abortion on the top of a lot of voters' minds, and something that's really at stake that Trump said that he would nationalize an abortion ban. It makes sense to have a woman stand here and campaign on behalf of that. She has been doing that throughout the presidency, her vice presidency. She's been speaking to what the administration needs to do and will continue to do so. So I don't see anything different because the presidential debate this year was actually earlier. And usually the presidential debates are later in September, right after the conventions, and they springboard the general election cycle. So this time the general election cycle just started earlier. So her being out there on the trail is just really in concordance with the schedule that they put together, having the debate start in June.
Yeah, and it has started earlier, and now we see the repercussions of it. But I'm wondering, you're on Joe Biden's team. What are your next steps in terms of what do we need to do in order to win this race? And actually, on the other side of it, what do we make sure we don't do, because that would make us lose the race?
Yes, and I will say that I'm a strategist and I work with the Democratic Committee. I'm not an exact member of the staff, so I want to make that clear distinction before I say this. I just meant as a scenario. Like, say you are on his team. I see.
What do you tell him?
Oh, yes. If you're on the team right now, it's really the time to rally the people and really make the strong case that you should vote for him, right? We went through reasons why we should not take the risk of sitting at home and letting Donald Trump win this election, because we've got to protect ourselves and save ourselves. Unfortunately, and fortunately, it is on us. And so if I were on the campaign right now, the strategy would really be around reaching voters, talking to voters in every way possible, doing what they're doing, which is having him out campaigning across the country, and then making sure that there is a field program to talk to voters about why this is important. Yes, these are people that maybe you don't feel you can relate to all the time. But the presidency is more than just one person. It is an administration of thousands of federal workers who are working to help you. And so that is the part that people need to realize and continue to do. And to remember, we still have to vote. Our ancestors fought so hard for this right, and we can't sit back, especially not right now.
A question for our guest, Tamia.
Tamia, President Biden missed an opportunity, I think, by not attending the Poor People's March and Rally on June 29th, a couple days after his debacle. I won't call it a debate. And I wrote a piece today that actually said he needs to get out more. Not just out. Calling 20 members of Congress is not it. He needs to go to these, it's summertime. People are out and about. This is a time, I was so happy to see Kamala at Essence. I think she was extraordinarily effective there. But there are all kinds of gatherings of sororities and fraternities meet in the summer, the NAACP, the Urban League. I think that he should be out and about, and I think that makes a case that the Congress says he hasn't made. What do you think about really programming him to be out more?
I can't agree with you more than what you just said. I started my work doing that type of outreach, making sure candidates went to our big events. And that's what he does need to do. The campaign, as I was saying earlier, really needs to make sure they're reaching voters. And the folks at the conferences that you mentioned, especially the NAACP, the Urban League, these are the people that do the work. And so he needs to make his case over and over again with organizations in addition to his campaign events. So I think that's the other thing that's important. So I can't agree with you. I can't agree with you any more than what you said, because I think it's just so important with all constituency groups to make sure that the president is speaking to people at these conferences and has the opportunity to really speak to what his administration has has done and what they will continue to do.
Devin, question for Tamia.
Tamia, thank you. I think a lot of us recognize that this election is going to come down to Black voters in key cities, in key states, whether it's Atlanta, Georgia, my hometown, Detroit, Michigan, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Oh, nice. So I think obviously, the president and his administration have delivered an incredible record for the Black community, whether it's creating jobs or lowering the cost of healthcare. But obviously, we've seen that those accomplishments haven't necessarily completely translated into sentiments felt by ordinary folks on the ground. What do you think Black voters, let's say Black men, because I think Black women are solidly, have been so reliable for the Democratic Party coming out and voting in elections. What do you think Black men in these cities, in these states, need to hear from the president to activate them? Not to necessarily not vote for Donald Trump, but to get off the couch and cast a ballot for him, for Joe Biden in November.
Yes, that's a great question. And thank you for shouting out my home city of Philadelphia, which is a very large city and a very large battleground state. And I will say just from that perspective, too, it's really we've seen with Black men in particular, the issues with the economy is really hitting home. And he really needs to talk about how he makes the economy stable, how housing can be more affordable, how our groceries can be more affordable once again, because I think that is one thing I've seen in just my campaign work this past year. That's at the top of voters' minds. And for Black men in particular, as they're leading their families, as they're trying to establish themselves, it's very important that he speaks to our men about those particular issues. And I know that he went to Morehouse, but we also need to go to other HBCUs. And over the summer, we need to go to non-HBCUs. And I'm an HBCU graduate, but I think it's important that we're reaching us everywhere. And then also, again, like Dr. Malveaux suggested, is going to these conferences where people are already gathering, meet the people where they are. So if our men are doing events or barbecues or what have you, he should stop through those. And he does have Black men at the leadership helm on his team. And I think that we'll see more of that focus over the summertime.
Thanks, Tamia.
Thank you.
All right, Dr. Domingo, a question for Tamia.
Yes, Tamia, I want to ask you a question about the media. People talk so much about how in 2016, the media gave Donald Trump over $1 billion and basically free advertisement, the way they kept promoting him. And I just wanted to get your thoughts on what seems to me to be a double standard where, Trump has been incoherent throughout the election process, looking at the rallies, so on and so forth. And so not even talking about the whole thing about wanting to be a dictator and all of that. I'm just talking about the optics and why you think or do you think the media has been fair as it relates to how it treats Biden's actions versus how they treat Trump's actions?
That's a great question. I just had this conversation earlier today. In 2016, President Obama was furious at how much airtime they gave Trump. And we're seeing it in a different way right now. I, at one point, just wanted to stop looking at my phone because I looked at one article about the debate and then my phone was flooded with every single thing that was bad about Biden or the administration or the campaign staff. And it does feel like it's a little bit of a coordinated effort here because it's summertime, it's slower, we can pile on. And we have to remember that a lot of these media companies are Republican run. So there's some advantages that they get when there's a Republican president, no matter who he is. And so we also have to be careful about the news that we're taking into and formulating our own opinions. And that's why I love coming on here and talking with you all the time and talking with Black folks who really are speaking to our issues, because sometimes it really is about the clickbait. We've looked at some of these articles where the headline has nothing to do with what happened, or there's these conversations that might have happened but didn't. And so we have to be very careful when we're looking at this. So, by a week after the debate, I was like, all right, that's enough. You all have dissected this thing longer than I can stomach anymore. But I have seen very little bit of writing about all the lies that Trump told at that debate. And there was no correction when he was talking about COVID and so many other things that I was frustrated. So I do think that we have to be careful about the news that we are looking at and knowing that there is some bias in the media, and it's unfortunate.
Yeah. Certainly there was a lot of contention in terms of the way that the debate was covered. As you said, Trump told a lot of lies. There was not a lot of correction. In fact, there were so many lies you didn't have time in real time to actually corrected that would have made it a much longer debate than what it was. I'm wondering, Tamia, in your estimation, what can the Democrats do in order to uphold Biden, perhaps, or what can they do that can make it a better situation? Because not everybody is fully on board. And it seems to me like there's a lot of work that Biden has to do, even within his party, in order to make sure that he's buttressed so that people understand he's got support from within.
Yes, and that's the important piece there, is that the party needs to unify together and rally around President Biden. When Trump stood there and lied, the Republicans still stayed, what do the kids say, 10 toes down for him, and we need to do the same thing. It wasn't a great situation, but at the end of the day, campaigns always have setbacks. I've been on several campaigns now to know this. And the best way to move forward is to come together and support the candidate that we have. And I know that the Senate is meeting. I know that the House is meeting. And I'm hoping that after these meetings, there is a real coordinated effort with them and the campaigns to unify our party so that when we get to Chicago, we are ready and rallied around our presidential and vice presidential nominees.
And speaking of the vice president, here's one that I want to kick back out to the panel. What do you think is going on with this whole non-support for Vice President Kamala Harris? She is next in line, but because she is next in line, I'm hearing a lot of Black women talk about how, well, this is what happens to me at the office, Dr. Malveaux. This is kind of par for the course. Even though I'm next in line, nobody is lifting me up and making sure that I'm getting what I am owed. What's being talked about in your circles, Dr. Malveaux, in terms of this treatment that we see the vice president getting when we know that she would be the next person in line if it ever came to that?
Well, my colleagues all have these experiences in academia, in corporate America, of being next in line and then being skipped over, or in fact, training the junior white boy who then gets the job they thought they were going to get. So it's commonplace to dismiss Black women. As Malcolm said, nobody is more disrespected than the Black woman. And we see that literally every day. But beyond that, I think that with Vice President Harris, there was always the racism and sexism in our country is such that part of the narrative that some are spinning is, well, she can't win. Well, white America won't vote for her. So you're going to go out of line and go, Gretchen Whitmer, bless her soul, just said she's not running. Take her name out of it. I'm sure Gavin Newsom, my California colleague, about as hungry as, never mind. But anyway, he's in California, so I don't know. He would love to have it, but he's been a good team player heretofore. El Mokongo was laughing because he knows me. I edited myself on Mokongo. I definitely edited myself. But some of these names that are being passed around, Pete Buttigieg is a great guy, but he's not really. Come on now. Would you lift him up over the sitting vice president? So people are really talking about what will happen if the vice president is passed over. How will Black women, the most reliable vote that the Democrats have, how will Black women react and respond? And I promise you, there are a whole, I will vote. I'm a yellow dog Democrat, which means I will vote for a yellow dog if it was a Democrat. So I'll vote for the top of the ticket, but I'm not going to be a happy camper if what ends up happening is that our vice president is passed over. Quite frankly, right now, I think that President Biden, he's got to get out and talk to people. He's got to get out, calling members of Congress, and he's going here and going there. Go to the hood, go to the Union Hall, go to some of the places where people have been reluctant, and I think he can shore himself up. And if he doesn't, there's a very worthy number two, and people should stop trash talking our vice president because she is our elected vice president, and the dollars in the Biden-Harris campaign, she's the only one who has a right to them if President Biden chooses not to run.
Tamia, I think looking at this, even if this talk of looking at someone else for a presidential candidate did come through, it would be a total mess. I think that that's something that for some people might sound good in thought, but really playing that out, that's a mess, is it not?
Yes, it is. Even switching is messy. And I think if the party leadership were smart, and there have been a lot of comments about the fact that she was skipped over when there were lists even being made, to discredit the Black woman who helped secure the presidency last time is just disrespectful. And trying to put someone else new in is also very messy in that the Biden campaign has raised hundreds of millions of dollars. And you also have to think about building a full-scale presidential campaign, a new campaign in a month, and to have that run from August to November, that's messy and dangerous. And I think that's a failed strategy. So really people they can have all the fun they want in trying to figure out who else is running. I love that Governor Whitmer said, I'm not doing this. And just to keep herself out of it, because it just creates chaos. And we don't need chaos right now. We actually need unity and order. And we need to be able to come together. And as Dr. Malveaux said, he needs to be able to talk to the people. And the speculation about who could come in, that's not for now. That's for another time. And this is our candidate, and we've got to move forward because we're wasting time. The Trump campaign is gaining ground, and the Biden campaign needs to really be doing that too instead of dealing with this distraction.
Right. And the more people that step away, like the governor, the less chaos, or else you're just going to have the media, Gavin, speculating over and over again about what if. So being a part of the media, what is it that you're hearing? Because the media is getting blamed a lot for messaging, for information that might be confusing. When you are working and speaking with those around you, what is it that you aim to do when you actually cover these types of stories that you may not see other people doing in other media outlets?
So I'll say this, a majority of my journalism is focused on opinion pieces. So I don't want to suggest that, I'm necessarily covering this story at the moment as a reporter. I'm covering it certainly on my own social media handles and sharing my thoughts, in platforms like these. But I think it's really important that we have people who look like us who are covering this story because, as was mentioned a moment ago, and a lot of the early lists that were being generated as to who might be able to step in should President Biden step aside, I was astounded to see the vice president's name left off of those. And we really shouldn't be surprised by that just because of the biases that we know exist in the media. And we've seen the unfair treatment of Vice President Harris for a very long time now. I think a lot of journalists have been, waiting for moments like these where they can continue, to discredit the vice president who, if you just look on social media right now, what are a lot of the clips that we're seeing surface? We're seeing, the gaffes. We're seeing as people call it, the quote unquote word salad. It's utterly disrespectful. What I'm not seeing on social media are the hundreds and thousands of clips that exist of the vice president, like how she spoke at Essence Fest over the weekend. I think we might cover this a little bit later today, prosecuting the case against Donald Trump like few people I have heard ever do. And so I call on those who are reporting this story to lift up the vice president and what she's doing and how she's speaking truth to power when it comes to prosecuting the case against Donald Trump, when it comes to prosecuting the case against other MAGA Republicans, when it comes to speaking truth to power around protecting our fundamental rights and freedoms, like reproductive rights, like a whole host of other rights and freedoms that are right now under attack by those on the right. And so I call on journalists and those who are even just talking about this issue on social media or with others around you to do so with integrity, to do so with respect for the vice president.
Yeah, and then Dr. Dibinga, if you don't get the news, because we get news that's put in our face all the time, but then our responsibility comes when we have to go out and create a narrative for ourselves to understand what's really going out there. We just can't wait for the news to fall into our laps. You really have to research to understand what all these candidates are doing. So I think part of it also falls on the voters.
Absolutely. And that's something that bothers me. For people who live in D.C. in 2018, I ran for city council. And if you blinked your eyes, you missed my campaign. So long it lasted. But I remember I was out there on the street trying to talk to somebody about, why they should, vote for me and the like. And she literally did not stop walking. And she said, I don't do that politics stuff. And I'm like, I just never forgot that. And as many of us have said on the show, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu, right? And so everything that we do in this world, from the toothpaste that we use to the road to the school taxes and why one school is funded better, it's all because of people that we send to office. And so this lack of, look, I understand the Biden-Harris campaign needs to do more. I understand they need to get out there more. Everything that was said to here, go to the hood. I get all of that. But there's a certain level of sophistication that's supposed to be expected from the voters as well. And I feel like people have used the fact that Biden is not literally knocking on their door as an excuse to be like, well, I'm not going to support this guy. Like, you can look up the legislation. You can look up the laws. You can look up presidential records. Like, we argue more about who's the NBA or NFL or WNBA MVP and cite all of those stats, but can't cite the stats about Biden versus Trump on black colleges, on diabetes, on student loans, and so on and so forth. And so I'm calling for all the voters out there to do exactly what you were just talking about, Candace, and do your research. I remember a story I saw about one guy who said he's not voting for Biden, and then all of a sudden $80,000 in loans got forgiven, and now he's hosting events to educate people about Biden's agenda. Like, that's the type of stuff that we need to be doing. It's not either or, it's both and.
Yeah. And that'll do it. You know, pay off somebody's loans. You're probably going to host an event yourself.
Time to get paid, blow up like.
Fanbase exclusive audio rooms are here. Now tap, talk, and get paid. Monetize your live podcast and most engaging conversations. You can now create exclusive audio chat rooms only for your subscribers and biggest fans. And as a user, subscribe, listen, and talk to your favorite creators. Now tap, talk, and get paid. Because everyone's a fan of something, and everyone has a fan base.